had to spend a lot of time thinking about this one to decide what I wanted to do with it, because it is one of the most classic cliffhanger episodes in the history of Star Trek. And it's also one of those where I can see why a lot of people would struggle to figure out what the heck they want to do with it, because of just how much it hinges on certain characters, and where if you try to repurpose the story and leave out those characters, it doesn't work anymore. So let's take a look at that. The core issue with this one, of course, is that it's really more of a lore and data story than a Borg story. See, because the Borg are really just lore's henchmen. That's the majority of what the Borg in this episode are. Lore's henchmen. I only actually see a few of them in person. Most of them are actually still on board the ship, which is quite a cool looking ship. Because, like, the idea here is that you're taking Borg technology and doing something a little bit different with it. Comes out not quite the same. Also, this thing is gigantic. See, it kind of feels Borg because of the fact that it still has all of those geometric lines and stuff. It's not a simple shape. It's a more complex shape. One that you don't really have the same sort of, like, reaction to, but it's something that you could play with a bit and have, like, several different ones. Because, like, some of the computer games have, like, similar ships that are not quite the same shape, just a little bit off. Anyway, though, fun thing to play with for Liberated Borg is giving them unique ships to themselves, because let's face it, when you're custom building your own ship as a group of Liberated Borg, whoever the heck is building it gets to make up their own ship design. So you could have all sorts of wild, wacky, random, whatever. Another fun thing with this episode is that since most of the main crew ends up on the planet as captives of lore, we end up having a replacement bridge crew helping Dr. Crusher pilot this Enterprise, while they have to fight that thing. Have fun with that. Also, the Enterprise does not have the firepower to kill that thing. It just doesn't. So Crusher has to trick it into getting too close to the sun so that she can trigger a coronal ejection and have stellar plasma destroy the freaking thing. Which, that's the sort of thing that you could have players do in a story, but if I was going to put in a combat scene like that, I wouldn't just have a single one right answer. Because, let's face it, your players might not think of that. Especially since, in this case, the metaphasic shield technology is something that wasn't something created in this episode. It was a relic of a previous episode where experimental research was being done, and the crew of the Enterprise just happened to be around to witness the experimental research and get their hands on the research data and reverse engineer it. Yeah, that story went weird places, especially since in this episode, the crew of the Enterprise demonstrate that they actually have the tech specs and that they can make the Enterprise shields do that at will. Yeah, that's the sort of plot contrivance that makes certain other things kind of strange, because giving the Enterprise metaphasic shielding sounds cool until you realize how many combat scenarios metaphasic shielding trivializes. Although, as shown in this episode, the weaponry of this Borg ship can blast through metaphasic shielding quickly enough that it won't actually let them tank its fire. So, it will, however, block out the solar corona. Whatever. Anyways, moving on. So, Tate and Barnaby, yeah, they're characters that they made up for this episode, and these are like the only episodes that they've been in. Are they cool characters? Yes, very much so. But only episode we see them in. Thing is, I'm mentioning them here because if it makes sense for your story to just make up on the fly new characters, do it. Makes the world feel more alive. It expands the setting that you're playing with. Anyway, though, so now to get to the core plot here. If you leave out the stuff between lore and data, this story is about a sub-faction of renegade Borg who are no longer working for the collective and are wreaking havoc as a separated entity from the collective. And in the group of Borg that are working for lore are basically written as a crazy cult because they're more or less being kind of using lore as a replacement for the collective, where they basically have a charismatic leader telling them what to do because they forgot how to make decisions for themselves or something. That is a thing that comes up in liberated Borg stories rather often, actually. Some people, when liberated from the collective, are just kind of like, huh? What? What am I supposed to do now? I don't know what I'm supposed to do now. I was supposed to do the collective things for collective reasons. And that's just what they're like. That is apparently a common thing with the Borg in this group, because all of them end up just doing what lore wants them. Well, most of them do. Some of them disagree with lore's plans, and there's also lore is doing some sort of weird experiments, and it's not entirely clear exactly what he's trying to do to them. But some of them end up brain damaged or something. I think what it is like he's trying to like transfer a mind from a mechanical being to an organic one or something. I'm not entirely sure. Oh yeah, also this episode has Hugh in it. Looking through the notes on the script, they'd originally planned for Hugh to have a larger role in the episode, but the finished version of the episode had so much of the lore and data stuff that they didn't have room for Hugh to do more than what's essentially a cameo appearance. Yeah, that's unfortunate. We also have several others. There's only actually like 11 that are like even background characters, because they didn't have the budget to make more than 11 of these Borg suits, because quite frankly, those are incredibly elaborate suits. I can totally understand why they only had the budget for 11 of suits like that. My personal thoughts on designing these. In a lot of cases, you're going to just tell the player what the character looks like, so you're not going to have to go to the time and effort of figuring out where all of the hoses go, or even if this particular character has hoses. As some people have pointed out, the way these suits are designed, it feels like an exosuit that you could take off, which would explain why it has so many hoses. Is because of the fact that the connections between components are not internal, They're external because of the fact that they can't route the stuff through the body of the person wearing the suit. Thing is, um, Borg are supposed to have a bunch of cybernetic stuff implanted in them. So, what level of cybernetics are we dealing with here? Anyways, again, it's one of those things where form follows function, and the way you describe something in a story defines what the players who are playing the story will see it as. So if you describe something that looks like this, that's what the players are going to work with. Even if it's not entirely what you personally actually feel is best, this is what you gave them. So it's what they have. Anyway, that is actually an interesting thing with writing Borg and disconnected Borg is that you will see stories where people are like, okay, so what am I going to do with Borg cybernetics now that I'm no longer a member of the collective? Some people decide they want to get rid of them because they want to go back to being fully human, which, well, understandable. You end up getting into all sorts of nitpicky stuff when you try to write that in a story. Anyway, though, this is at a relatively early stage of being liberated Borg, so they're basically just going around being kind of like a mini collective that is run by lore instead of actually doing things for themselves. And it comes up with an interesting sort of like a political thing because Lore is basically trying to create his own faction, and he's hoping to recruit more liberated Borg because they're useful minions. Now, how far Lore is actually going to get and succeed at this, good question, because as we see in this episode, he really doesn't get very far. The crew of the Enterprise D are able to uh, beat him, although some of what they do to beat him is plot-induced. Well, yeah, okay. The metaphasic shield thing I mentioned earlier, in this episode, it's basically just literal plot armor. Literal plot armor as a plot device with a name in the story. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying that it's incredibly convenient. That's all. Anyways, but yeah, this is one of those stories where I wouldn't try to use any of the specific details of it. So it's something where there's like vague concepts you can reuse, but I wouldn't try to use any of the specific details because it's just such a well-known story that unless you're trying to recreate the episode and have players play through the episode and maybe, do different choices, there's really no point in trying to specifically replicate this specific scenario. But again, the idea of Rogue Borg making their own mini faction that causes problems, that's something you can have fun with. Lots of stuff to work with there. Honestly, there's not actually a whole lot of other stuff in this episode that I actually personally think is good story fodder for making your own story. Seriously, the lore thing, I don't care. But that's my personal take. Anyways, let me know in the comments what you guys think about this story. See you later.